Hey fellow YouTube anglers, this is Chris in Colorado. Wanted to show you what I did to modify my Sun Dolphin Journey 12 SS. I did a lot of YouTube searching to do some modifications on a kayak like this. I didn't see a lot out there. As a matter of fact, I didn't see any out there. So I thought I'd make this video, so if anybody else has got a Sun Journey SS, you can check this out, and hopefully this gives you some ideas. I didn't come up with all of this by myself, but I came up with a couple of things by myself, and I hope this helps you out. So what we're going to look at is kind of a few things here. First thing, let's go back to the transom. You can see that I built a transom on the back of that of the kayak, and before we get into how I built the transom, we first have to address the shape of this kayak and the things that get in the way when you're trying to make this thing. So up here at the front is just like the back. The back, it has a little plug here to drain any water that gets up in there, and that's in the way because if you're putting a transom down here, it's gonna have to lay flat. There's very little space here to create a transom. Your other problem is this little raised part for your pull string, or whatever you want to call that. When you're hauling that thing around, this thing doesn't weigh much. It's only about 50 pounds tops when it's bare naked, but this gets in the way. So if you put a piece of anything in there, it's rocking back and forth, and you got to have something so you can just lay it flat on there. So what you end up doing is you get yourself a heat gun. Maybe you know somebody that you can borrow one from. I think I got this at Lowe's for 30 bucks, 40 bucks, something like that. Does real good. But these kayaks, they're made out of high density propylethylene. And the nice thing about the high density propylethylene is just about everything is made out of that these days, from bucket lids to buckets to kayaks, and it melts.
Bucket lids and buckets and kayaks,
buckets and all that stuff. So you know, you can melt this, and then once it cools off, it's hard as a rock again. So that's a good thing. So I took one of these guys, I melted this down. You got to do it kind of slow. You can't focus on there like a laser, but focus it, or don't focus it, and spread the heat out and let it get hot. And as soon as it gets hot, put something flat on it, and you can press this down. And then once you press this down, of course, you've got this hole here you're going to have to deal with, because that's a point that the water can get in if you want. So same thing here. I took these two screws. You see these two screws right here. It was the same setup in the back, so I took that out. Then once I melted that flat, and once I took this out, I took this high density propylethylene lid, HDPE plastic, and I'm just gonna say plastic from now on. I took this plastic and scored it right here so it would adhere real good, scored it in there real good, and then took that heat gun and melted that down. Just took little pieces of plastic, and you'd be surprised. It's like silly putty when you're melting it down in there. And then once it gets melted, it's rock solid. So putting that down flat is your first challenge with building this transom. So going back to the transom, this is also the plastic I've been talking about, this black piece here. It was one sheet of, let's see, that's 14 inches by, in all, 18 inches, I think, maybe 2 feet. And it's ½ inch thick. And I bought that at some manufacturer around here in the Denver area. I think it cost me 30 bucks, something like that. And I cut this down so that it would create this flat part. And of course, these braces are clothes hangers brackets, that are for heavy duty clothes storing. This bracket here is super important, this part right here, because as you're going to see later, this takes some force being pulled this way, and if you just put a regular angle bracket in there, that thing's going to buckle like a who knows what. So putting that cross member in there, getting a brace that has a cross member is super important. This does nothing. This is what the rod holds on for when you're hanging your clothes. I left it on there. I don't know why. I think maybe it looks kind of cool and it makes people ask, what's that thing? And I'd say, it's just there for show. So I cut this down, cut that in half, and then the remaining piece, all of this right here, I cut that in half again so that it would be, that's probably 3/4 of an inch thick, something like that. And that gives your Minn Kota motor a place to clamp down onto. So in putting that on there, I had to drill holes through the top of the kayak. And if you'll notice underneath the kayak, these bolts right here are for the bracket. They're not for this piece that's being attached to the kayak. All of those are internal. So I drilled 6 holes following the shape of the kayak. And I remember another thing I did is I created a stencil, just a piece of paper or cardboard, so I could outline what the shape of this was, so that when I was drilling, I knew where my holes needed to be. But all 6 of these holes go into the kayak. Now, here's the thing, you're saying, well, is it just self-tapping screws? No, these screws need to really hold it on there. So what I did is I took my trusty knife, and I believe this is the knife I used, just a good stiff knife, and I cut right here. I cut a nice thin line, and it took a little bit of effort. I didn't use an X-Acto knife because we're not cutting paper or anything. You need something with some backbone to it. And I cut all of that right there. And so by doing that, but I didn't cut the 4th part. And then by doing that, what I created was a little door. So this door, I can open that up. And notice I didn't cut that part, so it kind of springs back in. But now I can get my hand up in there and do the work that I need to do. And that'll also come in handy later on in the kayak project with the wiring that I did. And I had thought about using the plastic weld and just welding that back in place. But I'm not gonna do that because there might come a time that I need to do some maintenance on this, or there might come a time that I need to do some maintenance on this wiring for my trolling motor. So I need a door to get back in there. I know this is an ingress point for water. I'm just gonna cover it with tape just to get the occasional splash, keep the occasional splash from going in there. But frankly, if you're at a point where you're taking on water, this is not your problem. Your problem is getting back to shore. So put some monster tape on there, something like that, that'll just keep the occasional water. And I figure you ought to be fine like that. So once I had that on there, then it was just a matter of bolting on the transom. And then you can see where I put these bracket bolts. These are quarter 20 bolts, nuts and bolts, and those hold just fine with these large washers here. I chose those because I wanted them to take a lot of pull, a lot of stress. I I wanted to even out the stress. I think you know what I'm saying there. It's just the same thing here with your trolling motor clamp. That's why they put these here, so it doesn't drill down into it. So once I got that on there, that was pretty easy. So now I have the motor, but now I got to figure out how to control the motor, and I got to figure out how to turn the motor. None of these, most of this I figured out by myself. But the rest of this I found on YouTube here and there. But this is the big thing, that if you've got a Sun Dolphin Journey 12 SS, this is what you're gonna have to do, or you won't get a trolling motor on the back of this thing. You're gonna have to build something that comes across and hangs off the side, because there's just no room for a transom back here. You have to build the transom. So there's lots of other videos on guys that have done this before, but what I ended up doing was, there's just 6 little bolts. As far as the trolling motor goes, bolt there, and then in the back, 1, 2. You pop that off, and this head comes off, and there's a little mechanical control box that sits in there, and that comes out to normally where your tiller is, and that's what you use to change the speeds on the motor. And of course you turn it by turning the tiller like that. Well, I took that out and I just extended the wiring down here through this hose. This is vacuum cleaner hose, by the way. I got like 30 feet of this stuff for $5 at my local vacuum cleaner repair shop. And then I attached it to this 4-pin plug, which is what you use typically on any trailer, bumper trailer, hitch, things like that. And I cut a little hole in the back of right here, and I mounted this with some epoxy. And so now when I need to plug it in or unplug it, all I got to do is plug that in, and it's connected to my power when I'm done with it. So that's a nice clean install. I see a lot of guys that cut the top of this off and they have the wire coming straight out. This is purely aesthetics, leaving the head of this thing on there. I'll tell you, when I'm looking back at it, I like that I see the head turning this way and that way, so that I know that it's turning. If the wires are just coming in, it's a little harder to tell if this shaft is turning or not. So that's a kind of a visual directional indicator of which way your motor is turning. Another factor that I've seen in some of these YouTube videos is the ability to be able to pull your motor up when you're getting close to the beach or something. You know, I don't do that. You can do that if you want, but if you'll step back and take a look, this thing sits in the water. I think you can, well, on my side you can see it. The water line sits about right there. So we're talking from here to here as far as clearance goes. So we don't have a lot of space down here that we need to worry about. Generally, by the time that I have to worry about this thing getting into the rocks or the sand or the weeds or anything like that, front of the boat's already up on the beach. At least that's how it is here in Colorado. So you just step out and come back here and do like that, pull her the rest of the way up on the beach. So our next challenge was to get this to where I could power the thing. So the power cords and the speed controls run down through here, and again you can see here's the wiring. And then the wiring, I got some, you can get this stuff down at Lowe's, Home Depot, or whatever. And I reconnected it and just kept it in there so it wasn't, you know, 6 wires running around down in there. This flexible conduit. Got that to go through there, and then that runs through the kayak all the way up to this box. Now this box I got at Lowe's for $1.95 or 67 cents or something like that. I don't know. And this is just a piece of PVC. I drilled a hole, 1-inch hole in the center, and I put that control piece inside this box. At one point I was thinking I wanted to do a build video and bring you in step by step, but you're gonna have to figure this out yourself. I'm just gonna have to trust me that the control will fit in there. This is just a regular old junction box for electrical wiring inside your house. It's plastic. They come in blue. I painted it black just for aesthetics. And this part right here that my little fancy throttle control holds onto, this right here, this part, it sticks out of your motor up there. So this is actually part of it. The only part of this that is not part of the motor head I took out of there is this housing. The rest of this is the motor. And I think we're gonna trim and cut and put a little piece in there so that I can unscrew this and show you what it looks like in there. I think that's super important.
Okay.
You know? So we got that in there, and the wires run in through the hole, and they come back through here and then back up through this piece. Now you're probably wondering, well, how do I get the wires, run the wires from here all the way back to there? Well, that's another place where that door came in handy. But these rod holders that they give you, unscrew them, and then you feed your wires down through there. Use a coat hanger or something like that and fish it down in there and fish your wire back to this point. Grab your wire and then come back here to the door that I made. Use your wire again, grab a hold of your electrical wire, fish it, and then come back out so that you can work with it again. So that's how I got the wire from there to there to there. That's also how I was able to use to string this cable that's going to be used to turn the thing. So that's how we manage the wires getting in and out of there. Two of the wires in the motor are of course power wires, and that's what you hook to your battery. Those I drilled a little hole and put a little grommet in there so that they come out of the kayak. This is my power line, and then I put some clips on it, and you can put the battery of your choice back here in this milk crate. A note on the milk crate: one of the things that Sun Dolphin missed on this was just the general shape of this. Just about every kayak angler I've seen has a milk crate in the back, and they put PVC piping up here for extra rod holders. But you can't put one of those in here because of the triangle shape. So I just took, this is just that HDPE plastic. I took my Sawzall reciprocating saw, cut this down on each side, and then on the inside, you can see I cut all of this so that it essentially allowed it to collapse down to a triangle and fit in that triangle shape. Pretty easy thing to do. If you really wanted to go overboard with it, you could plastic weld all of that stuff together, but I just wanted something that held my battery and maybe some other stuff, my flip-flops when I'm in there and stuff like that. So it's a real handy thing, and just this minimal bit of cordage that they give you keeps it in there. It doesn't move around at all, and really the shape of it. Even if you wanted to move it forward, it can't move forward because this part back here, it gets jammed up in there. Batteries, that's going to be a personal choice. You know, batteries and power is a big problem on these kayaks. A normal 55 amp hour 8 lead acid battery, deep cell battery, is going to be 40, 50 pounds, something like that. That's a lot of weight back here. So you'll have to trade off for a smaller amp hour battery that'll fit back here. I use a Mighty Max 18 amp hour battery. It works just fine. All I use the trolling motor for is to get from point A to point B. I was out on this thing a couple of weeks ago, 6 hours going here to there, and I ran it out of juice. But you know, 6 hours on an 18 amp hour battery, that's a lot of hours. That's a lot of time out on the water. So if you just mind your P's and Q's, you should be able to get away with that. That little Mighty Max is only about like that, and stands about that tall, and does just fine. Or you could spend $700 and get yourself one of those LiPo 4 batteries, 55 amp hours, LiPo 4, lithium iron phosphate, $800. You know, weighs 11 pounds, something like that. That's a lot of money. But at any rate, this is where I put my batteries to power my electronics and my motor. So the next thing we needed to do was we needed to figure out, so you get your wiring in here, and then you get some handle. You can buy a knob and put it on there. You know, I was lazy. I just went and got this little bitty vice grip. You can probably find something, and it clicks onto your control box. And so you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 forward and 1, 2, 3 reverse, which works really well. You know, it's kind of like having a joystick in there when you're sitting in there and you're kind of going, I'm gonna go this way, and I'm gonna go that way, yeah. You know, that's my sound effects for the. So, at any rate, that's how you control the speed, and that's how you get the wiring up to this control box. Now the next challenge is how am I gonna turn this thing? I'm sitting up here in this seat, and there's no way I can reach this tiller back here. This tiller comes out to about right there, so can't reach it. I've seen some guys buy longer tillers to do it, but then that thing is hitting you in the back of the head or something. I didn't think that was a good idea. Plus, I was just kind of looking for a project. So I saw this guy, and maybe I'll try to put a link in the video where I saw him. He took these 2 eye bolts, and these are pipe hangers. You'll need to buy 2 of them because the threads in these pipe hangers are only on one side. So you got to buy 2 and then reverse it so that you can thread both sides and create the tension that you want. So you put that on there, and then you put these eye bolts in there, this screw part. This is what it usually hangs from the ceiling with. You put these cables on there, and a word about the cables: the reason that you don't want to permanently attach these cables to the eye bolts is because then you're either going to have to unscrew these eye bolts every time, or you're going to have to figure out the D-ring thing. And the D-ring thing is just a lot simpler. But when you decide it's time to go home for the day and you want to take this motor off the transom, and you unhook from here, you unhook from here, and then you unclamp, and you can lay it in the back of your truck or whatever, or lay it in the back of your kayak. So the D-ring is a good way to do it. This wire, I saw some guys were using paracord stretches. I don't care, you could sit there in the hardware store and take that paracord and try to stretch it yourself till you're blue in the face and you think, it's not going to stretch. But when you run 6-7 feet of it up front and then start putting some pressure on there with your legs, the stuff stretches. There's some stretch to it. So instead, I got this little bitty cable, plastic coated cable. And the reason I got plastic coated is because it's going to go through holes that have been drilled down through the kayak. So all of these cord tie downs, they had these little holes in them, and that's a perfect place to have your cable go through. So you just drill a hole through there, you know, it's a hole, so you're out on the water. That's a concern. Again, if you're getting so much water in your kayak through this hole, if you're getting so much water in your kayak, that hole is not your problem. I'm just saying, if that hole is underwater, you've got another problem. So, you know, you'll get a couple of drops in there, maybe, if it's raining. But if you're just paddling along, putzing along on the pond, this ought to be just fine. So these cables come down through right here, and just like fishing the power cable and the control cables through, those come out, and now they come out the side right here. Here you can put in a grommet. You can see I've got a grommet right here that sticks down into that hole, give you a little bit more water tightness. But most of these kayaks, they come with these footrests, and these footrests have pins in them, and the pins are supposed to help keep these locked in place according to your height. How much bend do you want in your leg? Do you want your leg all the way there? Well, if you take that pin out and you drill a hole down through here, these things are now freewheeling. And so you click the other side of the cable over here. Here's the back of it. Take your cable, use that hardware that comes with your cable to secure it, just like I did on the back, and that's not coming out of the back of it for anything. And you can see they're totally freewheeling. So you can do that. So what ends up happening is you take your foot, and when you press that way, if you'll take a look at the motor, it is now pulled this tight like that. Same thing happens on the other side. If you yank on it, pulls it like that. And that's your steering mechanism. Again, I didn't think of that myself. I saw a bunch of guys on YouTube that were doing that themselves. I thought it was a pretty good idea. Some guys run these cables on the outside of their kayak. I didn't like the cable on the outside of the kayak idea because I've got enough stuff on the outside of the kayak as it is. I got wires for my transducer and my Garmin Striker. I got line here for my anchor that I gotta worry about, and I've got my anchor trolley down here that is in the way. So 2 more cables running on the outside of the kayak, and if I did the power thing to the control box, if I ran the power for the control box on the outside, then I got to worry about it getting caught on something, getting pulled loose, something like that. Especially the power, because with connecting it on the inside here, and then connecting it on the 4-pin disconnect here, I don't have to worry about that getting wrapped around anything, getting wrapped around fishing line, a pole, whatever, a twig, doesn't matter. So the other thing about this Sun Dolphin is that this Sun Dolphin, it comes with a seat, and this is where you're normally supposed to sit, and it had a kind of a same real thin cushion back there that you lean up against. The problem with that, and this is a big knock that I've read about these Sun Dolphins, is that the water that you do get in here from paddling, you know, when you're paddling, water travels down your paddle, drips into your seat area, and your butt is lower than your feet all the time. and so you end up just sitting in a puddle of water. You know, it's not that big a deal. You're in a kayak. I suppose you ought to expect to get wet at some point, but it's just annoying. I don't know why they wanted to do that. So go down to your local Cabela's or Bass Pro or Shields or wherever, sporting goods store. You can get this stadium seat for about 30 bucks. Put it in there. It raises you up off the deck probably that much. But the problem is that when you're leaning back, you're now leaning back against this part of the kayak backrest, and that kind of gets to be uncomfortable after a couple hours out on the water. Simple problem, just one of your typical throwable Type 4 PFDs that you have to have on a boat anyway. Put that right there. I fished with it 6 hours a couple of weeks ago. Total comfort. Never felt the back of this thing. Super comfy the whole way. The other thing for upgrades, of course, I got the Scotty fish finder mount for the Garmin Striker 4. It's real easy to take on and off. Just pull it like that. This is your transducer arm right here, and so that's what goes down into the water. As you're getting close to shore, you can raise it up. If you need to get to your paddle, you can raise that up. Now you've got your paddle ready to go, and put her back down. I think that Yak Attack makes some little doohickeys that you can put on the side of your kayak to put this down a little lower. I just didn't feel like drilling another hole, and this works just fine. They're a little C-clamp that keeps that on there, but this is just fine. The nice thing about the transducer arm that Scotty makes is it gets down, again, you can see the water line right here. There's a little stain right there from the water. Water goes up about right there. You're at a good level. It tells me where the fish are. I don't know that I always believe that it's telling me where the fish are, because when I put my lure down in the water, the fish are never there. So at any rate, you can put another rod mount right there if you want. These tracks that are on there, both on this side and the other side, those are Yak Attack track mounts that you put in there, and you put these T-bolt devices on there. They work great. They're simple to put on. Self-tapping screws. You come around here to the other side. This is the mushroom anchor that I've got. It sits real nice right there, never gets in my way. If I want to anchor, because once you're out there on the water, if you turn the motor off, you're just a kite out there on the water. The wind's blowing you around, and you're never pointed in the direction you want to be pointed in, and in 2 minutes flat, you're 50 yards down the pond or lake or river, whatever it is. And the reason that I chose this particular anchor is because I see some guys using claw anchors and blade anchors and things like that. I didn't want anything like that that could get underneath a branch or a twig or a rock or be hard to pull up, because you know, you're sitting in this thing, you're leaning over to the side, you're trying to yank an anchor from 20 feet down, and it's wrapped around a twig or something. You're putting a lot of force on that. I didn't want that. All I want that to do is to drag behind me and slow me down. I see some kayak anglers using a parachute anchor, which I think is a good idea, but you're still drifting at that point. Typically, if there's no wind, I can put this down on the bottom. Kayak doesn't move at all. That line is attached to a Yak Attack line management system, and that's on this Yak Attack mount. It's super easy to put on. And the nice thing that I don't know if they intended this, but the nice thing is you look at your depth finder and you find out, hey, I'm 20 feet down. For every full round of line that you take off, that's about a foot. So if I'm at 20 feet, I know that I can take off, I can unwind 25 feet by counting how many revolutions I've done on that. And that just sits in there like that. It's nice and out of the way. And then when I have the anchor on, I can move it forwards and backwards just by using the trolley. Now I didn't know what I kept seeing trolley anchor system when I was first getting into doing some kind of kayaking. This is a pretty good idea. You get it from Yak Attack. It gives you all this hardware, and what you end up doing is you attach, when you have your anchor deployed, attach it to this ring, and then using this top rope, you can move that ring all the way to the back or the front. And what's nice about that is that when you get it all the way to the front, so now your line is going from here and it's coming all the way over here, and then it comes through here, and now it's going straight down. Wherever the wind's blowing you, that's the way your boat's gonna point. I'm probably preaching to the choir here. I'm sure a lot of you already know that. But you don't want the anchor in the middle of your kayak for a couple of reasons. The first one being safety. If you have your kayak anchored here in the middle and you have a strong current or a lot of waves that are pushing against the side of your kayak and your anchor is down here like that, it's going to want to tip up like this. So that's the biggest reason to have the anchor trolley, is to manage where your anchor is down from. So that's a nice thing. It's nice, real easy to grab. And then when you're ready to bring your anchor back up, you just pull this, undo your line from there, start bringing it up, tie it around that. It's all out of the way. It's a good idea. So I'm not sure what else I could show you about this project, but it was a fun project. It took me most of the winter to do it. Just did a couple hours at a time. It's worked great. I thought about putting some floating. It's not a kayak you can stand up in, I'll tell you that. It's just too narrow. The bottom doesn't have pontoons on the bottom so it can stabilize you. I've seen some guys take some PVC, create a T, and put some boat bumpers right here to help with that stabilization. Yeah, I decided I would just always sit in it. And I think that's about all I can tell you about this thing. It works great. I've got a video of me using it that will be at the end of this video, so you can see me turning it, motoring around the lake, actually in use. I was real happy with it. And if you got any questions, leave a comment below. I'll try to answer it. And good luck.